a lombaságon, lágy esti széltől suttog a virág, és minden szélese világon szerelmet érez, s hőn szeretni vágy. Elmondanám hű titkát én szívemnek, elmondanám, hogy mi hűen szeretlek, elmondanám, de hasztalan beszéd. Hideg szobor vagy, úgy sem értenéd. Elmondanám hű titkát én szívemnek, elmondanám, hogy mi hűen szeretlek, elmondanám, de hasztalan beszéd. Hideg szobor vagy, úgy sem értenéd. Szép kisasszonyka, ne zokogjon, a könnyet hagyja meg nekem, hisz engem megtiport az élet, s a búbánat a végzetem. Az ön szíve még lángra gyúlhat, az én ajkam már vértelen. Szép kisasszonyka, ne zokogjon, s a könnyet hagyja meg nekem. És odafönn Galíciában, hol szél süvít és hull a hó, búcsúzenet jött hajnaltájban, egy név és egy-két puszta szó. S hogy felrendültem a nevére, s most nekem jut a rossz szerep, az ön kis hadnagy vőlegénye, már egyikünké sem lehet. Szép kisasszonyka, ne zokogjon, a könnyet hagyja meg nekem, hisz engem megtiport az élet, s a búbánat a végzetem. Az ön szíve még lángra gyúlhat, az én ajkam már vértelen. Szép kisasszonyka, ne zokogjon, a könnyet hagyja meg nekem. Now, this parting song is coming up now. Neked a búcsú sose fájjon, holnapra jön valaki más, s ebből a nagy-nagy szerelemből nem marad már semmi más. Neked a búcsú soha ne fájjon, holnapra jön valaki más, s ebből a nagy-nagy szerelemből nem marad már semmi más. Ugye, Natasa, talán mi boldogok leszünk, ugye, Natasa, mi leszünk. Elmúlik minden, s lemosolyg ránk az ég, s a tikkat szádon lemosolyg minden rég, úgy, mint rég. Ugye, Natasa, talán mi boldogok leszünk, ugye, Natasa, talán elveszünk. Elmúlik minden, s lemosolyg ránk az ég, s a tikkat szádon lemosolyg minden rég, úgy, mint rég. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, 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 la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la la. But the first one is about the poor young fellows of a village called Rátót, and I tried to steal a goose, but held its neck wrongly, and the goose gave them away. And this song was often sang by probably the most famous Hungarian actress called Tolnai Klári, who actually at one stage when my uncle, your great uncle, who was a film director in Hungary, she was at one stage his girlfriend. So the song goes that way. Well, a Rátóti legények, the fellows from the village Rátót. A Rátóti legények, libát loptak szegények, rosszul fogták a nyakát, helyde a nyakát, s elgágintotta magát. Rosszul fogták a nyakát, helyde a nyakát, s elgágintotta magát. And the next song is about a person who takes a goose to the meadows, and he sits next to the goose and gently hits the goose's head.
Okay, let's get on with the show. Hi everyone and welcome here today, and also a warm welcome to all those watching on live stream. So it's a new age. I'm Andrew's son, Anthony, and I'm here to celebrate the wonderful long life of my beloved father, Andrew, who would have been turning 92 tomorrow. Unlike me, Dad seemed to thrive on giving eulogies. He had long planned to even write his own. Indeed, Dad rarely needed an invitation to speak. A true master of the segue, Dad could regale stories ad nauseum, much to the embarrassment of my long-suffering mum. Dad really did live life to the full, and it's really hard to summarise the many aspects of the differing aspects of his personality and his being in such a short speech. He was an extremely intelligent, very sensitive man who loved art and culture and women especially. Let's see here. So I'm still uncovering parts of his life, like his book of short stories entitled My Penis's Brilliant Career, which I can't bring myself to read just yet, as I'm sure you'd understand. So Partos Ondras was born into a middle-class, non-religious Jewish family on the 5th of February 1930, during the rise of anti-Semitism under Hitler, so not exactly an ideal time to be a Jew. So I'm just going to paint a bit of a picture about Dad's history and life, because it really did shape the person that he became. So Dad's mother, according to him, was a professional hypochondriac, and his father, Zygmunt, was a multilinguist and sportsman who won prizes for fencing and rowing. Before the war, his father, Zygmunt, was responsible for securing international loans for Hungary and encouraging tourism, and was also a renowned hunter. Now, Zygmunt's reputation for hunting was so great that even Goering, the commander of the German Air Force and co-creator of the Gestapo, asked whether he could hunt with him, and Zygmunt politely said, "I'm busy that week." So Dad grew up in a world where most middle-class families had a live-in maid. Dad also had foreign governesses to teach both him and his older sister Marianne foreign languages. In fact, one of their first governesses had just come from looking after John F. Kennedy, the future US president. So Dad was in good company. And subsequently, he was taught English and French and German by these governesses. The family also owned property at Lake Balaton, and where they would spend summer holidays rowing on the lake there and raising chickens and later eating them, which Dad wasn't so happy about. From initially residing in a 10-room apartment in Budapest, due to the various restrictions of Jewish life, they were eventually forced into a one-bedroom apartment that they had to share with other Jewish families. Andrew was naturally left-handed. However, his school forced Dad to write with his right hand, and this had a profound effect on Dad's writing ability, and his handwriting remained largely illegible for the remainder of his life. Dad liked to recall that he went to school with really high achievers, including a world-renowned conductor, a concert pianist, and the US billionaire George Soros. Wasn't a billionaire at the time, but he did make his money later. Dad claimed that he only excelled in one thing, and that was mediocrity. I don't share his vision, but that was according to him. And so he compensated by finding his own place in the class as the class clown. By 1940, Jews were forced to wear a yellow star on their clothing, were prohibited from riding on trains, going to the cinema, and entering into a sexual relationship with Christians. Jews also had to surrender all their jewellery, guns, radios, and telephones. They eventually were forbidden to work and forced to hand over businesses to Christians with no compensation. One of Dad's few pleasures in life as a 12-year-old involved going to the local schoolyard, which had been hosed down to make an ice rink. It was also frequented by 16-year-olds in Nazi uniforms. On one occasion, 5 of these youths proceeded to beat Dad up. When Dad made his way home, his father asked what happened, and the very next day, Zygmunt went down to the ice rink, confronted the gang leader, and proceeded to punch the living daylights out of him. So Dad claimed that he thought that his father must have been the only Hungarian Jew to dare to beat up a Nazi in uniform in public and live to tell the tale. And I think that story had such an impact on him, and he would retell it many times, but I think that initiated in him the innate want to always stand up for vulnerable people, and that's what he proceeded to do with his life. In 1944, his father Zygmunt was arrested and taken to an internment camp. Adolf Eichmann from the German SS came to the camp in order to deport Jews for extermination, and Zygmunt's life was only saved by the brave barracks commander who falsely claimed that Zygmunt's barracks only housed Christian criminals. With the aid of Zygmunt's Christian business partner, who helped hide members of the family, they all managed to survive the remainder of World War II. Now, Dad's uncle, Michel, had escaped France before the war and joined the French resistance fighters, later becoming a film director and screenwriter. As Hungary was taken over by communism, it was decided that it was best for Dad to leave, and Dad's uncle used his connections to help concoct a story that Dad was urgently needed for a film in France, and so by various dubious means, Dad eventually came to live in his uncle's Paris, and according to Dad, was charged considerable rent for his troubles as well. Anyway, Dad enrolled as the only foreign student at the local Parisian state school and was referred to by one of his teachers as the peasant from the Danube. It was a lonely time for Dad. He enjoyed going to local jazz clubs there and wished he could attract girls to the dance floor like some of the more exotic black men. I know that feeling. Anyway, Dad's sister Marianne had married an English serviceman late in the war and was soon married and living in England. She and Andrew visited each other across the Channel, but it was their father's dream that the family should migrate to Australia. Now, in 1953, Dad was skiing in the French resort of Val d'Isère when he received the news that his father had died on a ministerial delegation in Bulgaria. So after Zygmunt was given a state funeral, it was deemed that his mother would have been a burden on the state, so she was granted permission to leave Hungary and join Dad and his sister in Australia. So in May 1953, Dad booked a ticket on the ship Oceania for the 1-month journey to Sydney. Dad eventually disembarked at Manly Cove, where he was taken to the quarantine station, promptly made to strip, where his clothing and bags were fumigated. Dad's relatives here offered him a job in the textile import business, and so life in the rag trade began. And it was in the rag trade where Dad met his lifelong friend, Jacob Vroman, who is sitting right here today. And they had many adventures skiing in the Alps together. So Dad was bemused by the perceived lack of culture in Sydney at the time, and eventually became involved with the fledgling bohemian scene that included the art critic Robert Hughes and the first female Australian film director, Lilias Fraser, which I think Dad was secretly in love with as well at the time, but I digress. Dad also indulged in his passion for skiing, and at a time when there was actually no uphill transportation in Australia. Dad became a member of Kanama Hut, and where he stayed with Jacob. However, getting there meant hiking up to the main range near Mount Kosciuszko with a backpack full of provisions, as well as skis and stocks, and then you would proceed to ski down the mountain and climb back up. So Dad even managed to convince a new girlfriend to follow suit. Needless to say, the relationship didn't last, and nor did Kanama Hut, for that matter, which was destroyed by an avalanche in '56, 1 week before Dad's next booking. So he narrowly escaped ill fate there. Lilias taught Dad how to process photos, and so with this newfound skill, Dad spent a whole ski season at Thredbo managing a ski lodge called the Snowman, with a side hustle of being a ski photographer on the slopes. Now, Dad was not an especially gifted photographer, but due to the fact that the photos were in black and white and that many people looked the same with ski hats and goggles, he managed to sell the same photo to different people. So, he had a gift of the gab. So, in 1960, Dad was skiing in Perisher and had arranged to meet up with his old school friend from Hungary, Andrew Warman, and his wife Norma, who is also here today. So this is at the Man from Snowy River Hotel, which still exists. So Dad was eyeing all the girls in the place, and Norma said to him, "You're wasting your time. I can introduce you to the most beautiful girl in the room." Now, this girl in question was Robin Allen, who would later become my mum. Robin had studied physiotherapy with Norma and was also an avid skier. So Dad promptly asked her to dance, and she accepted. Now, Mum was a real catch and had plenty of other adoring fans, so she actually even stood Dad up the very next day to catch a ride back to Sydney with a dashing scientist in his red MG. So luckily, Dad got her phone number, so he was undeterred, as people who know him would attest, and a courtship ensued for the next 5 years. Dad said, "I was absolutely sure I never met such a wonderful woman as Robin, who was highly intelligent, very musical, very sporty, very adventurous, very cultured, and very stylish." Andrew's skiing ability and sense of humour impressed Robin, but his lack of ambition and lack of money certainly didn't. Now, Robin was in no hurry to marry and thought it best to put Dad off by setting him an impossible task. She said, knowing that he had no money, she told him that she would only marry him if he found a house with stunning views. So Dad said, when you are very much in love, nothing is impossible. And so with 5 separate loans, he managed to find a house in Seaforth, which had extensive views over Middle Harbour and a massive 2-million-year-old sandstone monolith in the backyard, which was Dad would always refer to as Ours Rock instead of Ez Rock. So Andrew and Robin were married in 1965. Robin compiled the wedding list for the caterers, but admitted her own name. So when Dad drew her attention to this, she said she'd be too nervous to eat, so she didn't want any food. And Dad said, "What have you got to be nervous about? I'm the one giving the speech." "Yes," she replied, "but I'm the one who's going to have to listen to it." So Mum and Dad cherished that house at Seaforth, along with its nature, views and spectacular rock. My dear friend Jenia, many years later, wrote a poem about that rock at sunset, and my son Raphael will read it later. Now, I was born in '68, and my wish for a beautiful sister with long dark hair was fulfilled 2 years later after that, with the birth of Vanessa. Now, it was by any standards an exceptionally happy childhood, filled with music and dancing, and later with horses, as Vanessa loved animals and horse riding, as her horse riding flourished. There were also many, many holidays, from skiing with the Kellerman and the Gall family to trips abroad to New Caledonia, Fiji, Europe, including 2 trips to Hungary to revisit Budapest and Lake Balaton. And I was accepted into the Conservatorium High School and Vanessa to Sydney Girls High. And so Dad dutifully would drive us both to school each day before embarking on his daily rounds, selling fabric to various Australian fashion labels, often to fellow Hungarians. So it always sounded as though they were arguing, but according to Dad, he was just doing a deal. In 1987, Vanessa complained of headaches, and it was discovered that she had a malignant brain tumour. So Mum and Dad did absolutely everything they could to try and treat her, but beyond radiation and steroids, there was nothing that could cure her, and still to this day, nothing can cure this. Mum and Dad made sure that the last year of her life was spent to the very fullest. Vanessa managed to keep horse riding throughout her sickness and skiing as well, and also went on an educational trip to Heron Island with all her school friends. After Vanessa died, Mum and Dad launched themselves into new hobbies and interests as a way of coping with profound grief. Mum took up Tai Chi, Israeli dancing, Argentinian tango, and they both embarked on their mutual passion of Aboriginal affairs and travel. Now, my parents travelled not just as tourists, but on quests for knowledge and understanding. Mum would research each trip methodically, and their destinations included Tunisia, Morocco, Laos, Cambodia, China, Cuba, Japan, Turkey, Israel, Mexico, and India, just to name a few. They also went on extensive camping and education trips within Australia, staying with Aboriginal communities. I had, in the meantime, settled down with my partner, Rebecca, who's here, and my 2 sons, Felix and Raphael. Now, once when Dad went to pick up Raphael from preschool, Raph said to him, "I don't like that man's face." And so Raph ended up going home with a completely different family altogether, much to the deflation of my poor dad, who shuffled off home. In 2004, we decided to take Mum and Dad back to Charlotte's Pass, where I learnt to ski, and it was a lovely time to relive my own childhood and teach Felix also how to ski. Ralph was a little young. It was there, however, that Mum discovered that she was coughing up blood and was diagnosed with esophagus cancer. She eventually passed away in 2006. Her last words were actually to Dad, saying, "Stop shuffling. It sounds like I'm in an old people's home." To console himself, Dad ploughed his talents into letter writing, not only to Manly Daily and the Sydney Morning Herald, but also to his local member, Tony Abbott. Dad always signed off his acidic letters, "Andrew Partos, your favourite constituent." Dad tried to keep his spirits up by maintaining his sense of humour. When people asked him how he was, he would inevitably say, "I'd be on top of the world if I wasn't living down under." And that's pretty much summed him up. At the age of 78, I took Dad on a skiing trip to Japan. Dad clearly loved it and wasted no time in chatting up unsuspecting skiers as captive audience on the chairlift up. They were pretty glad to get off. He was pretty proud that he could still ski at that age. And I encouraged Dad also to get new business cards that read "Agent Provocateur," as I thought this would amply sum up his talent for letter writing. I remember Dad gleefully handing out his business cards to some young girls who took an uncanny interest in Dad in the mistaken belief that he worked for the famous lingerie company of the same name. They were a bit disappointed. Despite continuing tennis and annoying politicians, Dad felt very lonely, and so began his quest for female companionship. Some short-lived, passionately emailed relationships came and went until Dad met Terry Cameron on Daydream Island, and she will speak to that relationship after me. In 2017, Dad told me that he thought he had the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Now, I didn't believe him at the time, but it soon became apparent that his self-diagnosis was in fact correct. The last few years were a very challenging time for Dad and also his friends and family. So I want to extend especially my thanks to our longtime friend Bronwyn Birkenstein for helping us through Dad's last strange journey, and to all the carers who put up with Dad's antics, and of course Terry for her unwavering love and dedication to Dad. As Dad's health declined, there were still moments of humour and intrigue. Dad went through a stage of only speaking French and then only Hungarian, but when he was angry. He also went through a long and lovely stage of remembering more and more Hungarian songs that his mother used to sing to him as a child. And wordplay was also a talent he held till the bitter end. Some of his last memorable ones were, "The world is lapsing and collapsing," and "I'm coming and I'm humming," because he was still humming. And when I told Dad, "I love you so much," he responded, "Well, it gets in one way or another." And so truer words were never spoken. Thank you, Dad, for your insight and love. I will miss you more than words can describe. Thank you. So I will introduce you to my partner, Rebecca Gregg, who's going to be speaking now on behalf of Barbara.
Am I allowed to take this off? Hi, I'm Rebecca, obviously. Today I will be channeling Barbara Pepworth, who is the only daughter of his sister Marianne, the only child of his sister Marianne. Marianne is 95, living in the nursing home close to, like in another ward near Andrew, and much love to them today. And I'm sorry I'm not Barbara, but I will be speaking in first person, just so you know. My name is Barbara Pepworth, and my mum, Marianne, is Andrew's only sibling, making me his niece. After the horrors they endured in the war, but before they came to Australia, Mum and Andrew were very close and would holiday together, enjoying each other's company as young adults in Paris and on the Riviera. Andrew also visited Mum in the UK, where she was living with my dad's family when they first married. Andrew has been in my life from the beginning, and I do not remember a time when I didn't know him. He gave me my favourite childhood toy, a segmented wooden sausage dog that I could pull along and that I played with all the time. I loved it. For many years, Nini, Andrew and Marianne's mother, lived with Mum, Dad and me. Initially in Milsons Point, Andrew would visit and join us on family picnics and sleep. Even in his 20s, he seemed to snooze a lot. And as an aside, as Rebecca, not as Barbara for one moment, when our children were growing up, Anthony and I rarely got out, but when Robin used to come and babysit, and she was wonderful, and she'd bring Andrew with her. And then after Robin died, Andrew was determined he was still going to come and babysit for us, and we'd arrive home at 10 or 11 at night, and sure enough, there would be Andrew dozing, sound asleep on the couch, with Raph kind of jumping up and down and doing whatever, and Felix sitting there with the computer going like, it's like, so I'm not sure who was babysitting whom, but that tendency to snooze obviously remained. And I'm now Barbara once again. Andrew was always thoughtful, kind, and generally lovely to be around. He always knew the perfect gift for me, including a set of 4 beautiful pastel bird paintings when I was a little older and very interested in art. On my family's move to Killara for my 7th birthday, he gave me the second dog in my life, the adorable Flopsy, a pedigree golden cocker spaniel whom I adored. Again, the perfect gift. She was a valued member of our family for 14 years. In Killara, Andrew lived downstairs behind the garage in what we jokingly referred to as the servants' quarters, which had a bedroom, bathroom cum kitchen and a separate toilet. He lived there from when we first moved to Killara in 1963 until he married Robin in 1965. Because his living area was so small, he bought a large outdoor table and lots of chairs, and he'd use the backyard barbecue to cook and host all afternoon and well into the night eating and drinking affairs with his many friends, who were a constant source of fascination and seemed very sophisticated to me as a child. As with any barbecue in the neighbourhood, Flopsy was always the first at the table, and Andrew would playfully swat her away after she enjoyed a sausage or two, much to Nini's dismay. I was 10 years old when I was invited to be a flower girl at Andrew and Robin's wedding. my first and only Flower Girl gig. So exciting. Andrew and Robin's wedding was also memorable for another reason. It was where I had my first taste of champagne. And as another aside here, Barbara sent these wonderful photographs that unfortunately we decided were too technically awkward for us to set up today, but you will see within the slideshow later some of the photographs that illustrate what she's speaking about. Andrew was always thoughtful. On the opening night of my first play produced by Nimrod Theatre, the biggest bouquet and most heartfelt congratulations card I received were from Andrew and Robin. I remember lots of enjoyable, fun Sunday lunches hosted by Andrew and Robin at Seaforth, some for special occasions like birthdays and some just great get-togethers for no other reason than family, and then myriad Christmases spent together over the years. It was always interesting to sit between Andrew and Mum, two people who were each convinced that they were right, absolutely right, but who more often than not seemed to have very different opinions. I can vouch for that, as can Terry. Over the years, Andrew sent me all the letters he submitted to the editor and his missives to Tony Abbott, who seems to be getting a lot of mentions. I thought they were terrific. Andrew's intelligence, wit and humour shone through all of them. He later sent me his plays, which I wish I could have helped produce, as they were simply delightful. The last time Andrew and I resided under the same roof was when Robin was in RPA and Jane and I offered him our guest room so that he wouldn't have to travel so far to visit her. Always a man of many gifts, Andrew didn't fail to deliver on this occasion either. He left a coat in the built-in wardrobe. In the coat pocket, he had a carton of drink, an early kombucha-style fermented drink, which exploded loudly while Andrew was out visiting Robin. The inside of the wardrobe, Andrew's coat and his other clothes, were redecorated in a purple juice which went everywhere. We couldn't scrub it off, and we ended up having to repaint the inside of the wardrobe. So her last gift wasn't quite as good as Flopsy. Andrew was an integral part of my life for 66 years and my family's life for even longer. A wonderful uncle to me, brother to Mum, and brother-in-law to Dad, and we will all miss his generosity, his love, and his humour. Vale, Uncle Andrew. Thanks.
So, Michael, would you like to say a few words? Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Warman. I'm going to give you the perspective of being the son of parents whose lives were interwoven with Andrew and Robin. Pardon my accent, it's the result of living in the States for about the past close to 40 years. And I also share many, many happy memories of growing up in the 60s and 70s with the Partos family. My dad was Varman Ondras, who also was born in 1930 in Budapest, Hungary. And no later than the age of 10 did he become close friends with Partos Ondras. They went to the same Jewish gymnasium, and as Anthony mentioned, his dad rising to the fame of being the class clown, the only competition he had for that role was that of my father. They were both very close. When my father went to Paris in 46, Andrew followed him in 47. They went to the same high school in Paris. My dad came out to Australia in 48. Andrew came out to Australia in 53. They skied together. They were both avid skiers. It seems like Andrew Partos was more forthcoming about his female conquests, BM before Mum. My dad, I think, was somewhat more reticent on that aspect, but I think they both enjoyed themselves as youngish continental bachelors that were strange animals in Australia at that time. Following that, as was mentioned, my mum introduced Robin to Andrew. And at their wedding in 65, Dad was the best man. Following that, I came in 1960, my younger sister Anna came in 62, Anthony in 68, thank you. You don't even look like you were 68, let alone 1965. And of course, Vanessa in 70. So they led very parallel lives through all these years. When I think of growing up in the 60s and 70s, there were so many happy memories of going to Seaforth and just sharing many, many happy, just times spent together as close family. Robin and Andrew were renowned as gourmet chefs. And as a young boy, I always looked forward to those Sunday meals with Andrew futzing around making the salads. I think that was one of his specialties. We'd have barbecued fish in the grill in that massive rock. Andrew introduced me to the classics of antiques. He really missed his calling. He would have made a remarkable antiquarian. Antiques, classical music, good food. You would call him an Epicurean. He really was a highly cultured man. But at the same time, there was Puck, like from Midsummer's Night's Dream. There was that court jester, as Andrew said, agent provocateur. He liked to be the pebble in your shoe that irritated you, the gadfly, the Don Quixote fighting against the windmills of our time. But he always had that impish smile, and we had so many good adventures and so many happy memories from growing up as a family, just being very closely tied to the Partoshes. Anthony, as was mentioned, with his younger sister dying way too young in '88, his mum dying way too young in 2006, being the good son, as he was with his father. Some of you may know Andrew put together, I think with Barbara's help, etc., that wonderful book, A Life Story of Anthony Partos, Andrew Partos. Yeah. I actually glanced through it last night, all 152 pages of it, so I already knew a lot of Anthony's speech today. But that's a remarkable homage of a son to his father. And if any of you are curious to learn of a life, an interesting, cultured life, starting off in Hungary, through Paris, coming out here, one of the funny memories I have of Andrew, was that at one stage I was involved in some garment factories in Africa. And I came out on one of my visits, and I spent the day with Andrew in his sedan with the rolls of textile fabrics in the back, of Andrew visiting all his difficult and yet friends, Hungarian clients in the Schmada business. And that was just a very, very colorful day of Andrew doing what he did. Not really his calling, but that's what put bread on the table. So when I think of Andrew, I just think of an Epicurean, a lover of the good life, cultured, a Puck, a contrarian. There's that famous little quote of Puck in A Midsummer's Night's Dream of, I am that merry wanderer of the night. So as Andrew goes gently into the night, well, as an agent provocateur, I can't imagine Andrew going gently anywhere. If in that afterlife, although he was an atheist, there was that news conference with Saddam or John Howard or whatever, I think Andrew will have his sandal ready to hurl at either of them in the front row, with that twinkle of the eye, a skip of the step, and that puckish, impish grin that we all remember of Andrew. So thank you for those happy memories.
So I'm just going to read out a very, very quick note from another good family friend from the Kellermans. So this is from Peter Kellerman, who I grew up with as well. Some of my best childhood memories are of our two families together. Our parents connected so well with our mums being best mates, and our dads, both Hungarian refugees, connecting also. Your dad was the funny one though, charming and urbane, if increasingly eccentric in later years. He was also the better skier. Our almost annual ski holidays together and weekly tennis matches were a lot of fun. I will cherish those many childhood memories. So I'd like to introduce you to Melody. Please come.
Hello. Andrew Partos was the name that kept appearing in the letters pages of the Mossman Daily when I worked there as a reporter. And I thought, Partos, Seaforth, I wonder if it's the same family as the guy I went to school with, Anthony Partos. And it was Anthony's dad. He was passionate about local issues and in particular, Tony Abbott. In fact, I thought at times his passionate hatred for Tony Abbott kept him alive. But when Andrew turned 80, he was thrilled to receive a letter of congratulations from Tony Abbott. When we went to a live filming of Q&A at the ABC in Ultimo, Tony Abbott was the only guest. And afterwards, Tony Abbott came up and said hello to Andrew, and he was thrilled. Andrew told me, and I didn't witness this, but when Abbott was health minister, Andrew stood up in a public meeting and said, "The cause of my depression is the Howard government." To which Tony Abbott replied, "It's fantastic that you have issues that you're passionate about, because it's really good for your mental health." He wrote countless letters to the Mossman Daily, the Sydney Morning Herald and others, some very to the point and about many issues, and some really just humorous. For example, it's hard to have hanky-panky when the woman is cranky. And it used to be bad manners to talk about politics, sex and religion. Now you can't even talk about the weather in reference to climate change. Anyway, I can't remember exactly how a conversation started between Andrew and me. One day he came to the Mossman Daily on a Monday and we were on deadline. So I said, "Please come back on Wednesday and we can have lunch." It was a dip in the news week. We had lunch and it was clear that he was very, very lonely after the death of his beloved wife, Robin, of more than 40 years of marriage. And my own mother had died the year before. I loved hearing his stories about her, their wonderful marriage. He adored her. And he kept saying, "Melody, how should I put it?" I said, "I don't know how she should put it." "She didn't want to marry me. I had no money, no ambition." And I just said, "Look, obviously you're an amazing man." And Robin would always reply when he said that to her, constantly, that she married him because he was full of love and had a great sense of humour. I think we all agree on that. So we met from time to time and had good chats. Our friendship developed. And I would tell him about the various boyfriends I had and ask him advice. And after a while he said, "Where's your father? Do you see him?" And I explained he lived in Brisbane and I only saw him occasionally and, it was difficult. And since then our relationship has improved a lot. But Andrew quickly became a father figure to me. And it turned out that his daughter Rebecca, who tragically died at the age of 17 from a brain tumour, I was about the same age as she would have been had she lived. So we became surrogate father and daughter. And here's the email he sent me on the 1st of February 2007, which I keep in my drawer. "I am so pleased that you allow me to think of you as my daughter. Vanessa was such a delightful child. I had such a special bond with her and I still miss her terribly. One of the most important things in life is to have self-love, self-esteem. With all the killings, all the destruction in my youth, I didn't have any until I married Robin. And now my self-confidence is almost overbearing. Love comes in many shapes and many forms, and mine is paternal towards you. I want to protect you, to make sure that you don't get hurt. Please be cautious and make sure that before anything significant happens between you and somebody else, that he loves you and you love him. Your surrogate father. I had a number of different boyfriends during the time, and I would introduce them to Andrew. He vetted them. He did. And he was very wise and compassionate, and he was always spot on. He would always encourage me and give me confidence when they didn't work out. And, it sounds silly now, but, say you are worth someone who is worth loving. And at times it was so hard, and my mother had died. My brother was in Malaysia, my father was in Brisbane, and I went through some pretty dark times. I would call Andrew, and he would tell me stories about his life, about Robin, their trips, Rebecca, Anthony, his life in Paris. Incredible stories and really hard times as well. He was the ultimate survivor and an amazing sense of humour. I'm almost finished. One relationship breakup, I actually stayed at Andrew's in Rebecca's old room. I know I was a bit, but I was so depressed I got up in the morning and told Andrew, I just can't go to work, can't. And we sat and had a cup of tea in the lounge room, and he talked about a few things. And we're in the lounge room, and he chatted for about 20 minutes, and then I said, I think I can go to work. I can do it. It was just incredible. When he met my husband, Keith, who's here today, he called me the next day and said, Melody, how should I put it? I said, I don't know. How should you put it? He said, I have no doubt you have met the right person. It was like the king. The king had spoken. And we've been married for 10.5 years now. So it's hard to explain what Andrew meant to me. He was the father I might have had. And I do say this, trying not to disrespect my father. In Andrew's own words, he just wanted to fill the gaps. He was a loving and open man who there was absolute trust and respect. My own father had a very difficult life, has a very difficult life, full of pain and grief at being a gay man and wishing terribly, terribly that he was not. He's just had a life of pain, closed and distant. I could literally feel my brain cells arranging themselves differently when I spoke to Andrew. It was just this huge acceptance and just an incredible man. So I'm blessed to have him in my life, and thank you, God, for bringing him into my life. May he rest in peace, although I'm pretty sure he'll still be sending letters to the papers.
So I just want to introduce everyone to my son, Raphael, who will be reading.
I can what? We saw it from the rock once. Yahweh kissed the sky, and we saw it. With eyes fixed on fire and reflecting the glow, we gazed at the grandeur and melted in the vitality of its magic. Our sky had never been before and never would be again. We watched it glitter towards us and go. Perfection enveloped the rock, and we, and Yahweh, were on it. In it. Once. Thank you, Jenia, for the poem.
Yes, thanks, Jen. That poem meant so much to our family. So I'd like to finally introduce you to Terry Cameron, who will be speaking now.
It was really a fluke that I ever met Andrew. I was on a short holiday with a girlfriend up at the Whitsundays at Daydream Island. He was a good 20 years older than the rest of the group, and on the second day, we had a game of volleyball organised in the pool there. We're on the same team. I was up towards the net, he was behind me, and as Andrew leapt up to catch the ball, he developed a cramp in his calf and yelled out, and the game was halted. The next day we had a game of tennis. We played singles. And I could tell over the few days there that he was a very nice style of European man, educated, he had beautiful manners and was passionate about politics. It was towards the end of that year that we got in contact again and a friendship began to develop. As you all know, Andrew was a prolific letter writer. He sent letters to the Sydney Morning Herald, his local Manly Daily, and also English papers. Many were published. In true agent provocateur style, one of his letters to the Manly Daily had so incensed a conservative reader that the reader had started posting excrement to him. Andrew had contacted the police, who were pretty hopeless, and they thought perhaps it was someone from the local RSL that was so put out by his views. And so it was in this context that he contacted me to see if I had any ideas legally about postal law or something. I had no idea. It never occurred to me that I would end up with someone in their 70s. But Andrew was not your average 70-something-year-old when I met him. Age never defined or limited him. When I met him, he was attending classes at the University of the Third Age in advanced French conversation, in creative writing, in politics, and many other courses that were put on from time to time. And he continued attending these into his late 80s. On a Friday night, he would go over to Paddington to Music Aviva to listen to whichever style of ethnic music was featured and have a dance, even though he couldn't tell left from right. And on Sunday mornings, he'd play social tennis and then often go to a tango class or some other South American dance class at Glebe. He had so many interests and energy to burn. Andrew's writing wasn't only confined to writing political letters into newspapers. He'd written a play in his early 20s when he was living in Paris for his actor-director uncle that he thought might be turned into a movie script. It was called Le Chercheur de Plaisir, or The Pleasure Seeker. And after Robin died, he wrote another play titled The Old Man and the She, which was a very amusing and witty dialogue, but more of a monologue. What was clear was that Andrew loved an audience, to receive applause, to have his ideas published. He was so delighted to see his name in print. I almost expect him to lift the coffin lid and sit up just to get a clap. His poem, The Bible According to Andrew, was a creative project that gave him great pleasure. He entered a poetry competition that was called the Blake Prize. It was open to all Australian poets of any style and from any religious or spiritual faith background to explore the wider experience of their spirituality, religion or belief. Andrew, as you know, was a fervent atheist, and his poem, which was rhyming couples, sending up the various stories in the Bible and all religions for their absurdity and fanaticism, had zero exploration of spirituality in it. But he derived so much fun and achievement in creating this, and he felt quite cheated when he didn't win. But he was undeterred. He saw another poetry competition advertised. This time it was the Poetry Slam competition. So off we went to Marrickville one morning, where he performed his poem in front of street smart hip-hop poets, utterly unself-consciously. A very important political engagement that Andrew entered into was his support for the plight of Julian Assange and the right of free speech. His passionate interest in this cause led him to write many letters on the topic, including one into the ABC's Q&A television program. On the night when his question had been selected to feature as the first question of the program, while he was just sitting in the audience, waiting for it to start, he had an idea that if Julian Assange, who was at that time holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, if he was successful and if he sat for a Senate seat for the WikiLeaks party and was successful, even in absentia, then he could claim diplomatic immunity. So he quickly wrote this down and passed it on to one of the panellists, who was Jeffrey Robertson, the leading human rights advocate. And Robertson must have liked the idea, because he then presented it as his own during the segment. John Howard's book launch. This is a really good example of Andrew's passion for politics and the importance he placed on standing up for the rights of others. He decided to attend a dinner put on by the Liberal Party to promote one of John Howard's books. He'd asked me to accompany him, but I wasn't brave. I had no desire to sit with a large group of Liberal supporters knowing that Andrew was going to go into attack mode sometime in the night. But he bought his ticket and he told them that he was hard of hearing, so he could secure a seat very close to John Howard. And as soon as the questions were allowed, he asked how could the Liberals justify such a racist policy, which was in effect an example of collective punishment against the Indigenous citizens of the Northern Territory. When he continued to argue his point, they asked him to leave, but he held ground and stayed. At the end of the night, John Howard came up and shook his hand, guessing he must have been a Holocaust survivor, and walked with him to the car. He was so exhilarated when he came home that night. He'd stood up for something against a whole bunch of people, and it was just wonderful. As we've heard, Andrew was very much a family man. He used to say that a man's home is his castle, and living in Castle Circuit and having found a home, a house that Robin was happy to live in, having married her and having a lovely family gave him great pride. His love for Robin was most obvious when he spoke about her musicality and her other talents. He felt enhanced by her and adored and supported her in all aspects of life. This continued after her death. She was his north. He loved women in general, in the nicest way, once jokingly saying to me that the phrase equality, fraternity, and liberty would be improved if the concept of maternity was inserted into it, acknowledging the beauty of women and motherhood. He was a devoted parent to Anthony and Vanessa, delighting in their achievements, driving them to school each day. Vanessa's death was a deeply tragic loss that stayed with him, but he was an optimist at heart and carried on, proud as punch of Anthony as a person and as a composer. He always got a tremendous kick out of hearing about Anthony's upcoming projects and attending functions where Anthony's music was showcased. I'm very pleased that this is being live streamed today because there are dear friends overseas who can't be here, friends that have been in contact with Andrew for 60 to 70 years. Stephen, Marta, Shirley, Andre, and others in Sydney who haven't been able to attend, such as his adored sister Marianne, Barbara, and Jane. I have to make a very special thank you, though, to the wonderful carers at the Hawkins Lodge at the Marion for their kindness and the care they've showed Andrew in this last year or so. Sheila, Bishun, Lucy, and Pratibha, as well as some others. Please forgive me if I haven't mentioned your name. You became his surrogate family and made what was an extremely difficult period in both of our lives bearable. I know how much you cared for him, and I will always be indebted to you for your tenderness, patience, and perseverance under the most trying of circumstances. As for me, no words can express the depth of my affection, attachment, and love for Andrew. He really knew what was important in life. He was loyal and loving. He meant the world to me. I was very lucky to go on that holiday.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. So we're going to conclude today with just a slide tribute to Dad, and then everyone is invited to the reception here for a light lunch. And you'll be serenaded on your way out by my father's Hungarian folk songs. So thank you very much.
So this first song is about picking sour cherries from a tree, and it just says that our custom is that a young man climbs on the tree and throws down the cherries, and the young girl collects it in her apron. Már mi nálunk babám, az jött a szokásba. Nem szedik a meggyet leveles kosárba. Fölmegy a legény a fára, egy fa tetejére, azt ledobja a meggyet, te meg babám szedjed a rózsás köténykédbe. Fölmegy a legény a fára, a megyfa tetejére, s ledobja a meggyet, te meg babám szedjed a rózsás köténykédbe. The next one is a song from Pennsylvania, and it's about a man who fell off the horse and broke his arm, and so he can't embrace his beloved again because he's got a broken arm. A csitári hegyek alatt régen leesett a hó. Azt hallottam, kis angyalom, véled esett el a ló. Kitörted a kezedet, mivel ölelsz engemet? Így hát, kedves kis angyalom, nem lehetek a tiéd. Kitörted a kezedet, mivel ölelsz engemet? Így hát, kedves kis angyalom, nem lehetek a tiéd. The next one is a drinking song, and it's about this fellow who, in spite of the fact that he drank quite a bit of wine and got tipsy, that the girls still love him. Vörös bort ittam az este, angyalom, ragyogó csillagom. Hely, de be is rúgtam tőle, angyalom, ragyogó csillagom. A lábamon alig állok, mégis szeretnek a lányok, angyalom, ragyogó csillagom. This is actually a csárdás. A lábamon alig állok, mégis szeretnek a lányok, angyalom, ragyogó csillagom. The next one is about a fisherman on the Lake Balaton whose net was forsaken by luck, and whose beloved has left him too. Hullámzó Balaton tetején halászik egy halászlegény, hálóját a szerencse, őt pedig a kedvese, elhagyta el a szegény. Hálóját a szerencse, őt pedig a kedvese, elhagyta el a szegény. The next one is about stork that brings the babies, and it's about this fellow who kept on telling the stork not to go to the lake, and he used to go to the lake with his beloved until such time as the stork was making some noise above their house because she got pregnant. Gólya madár, hosszú lábú gólya, mindig mondtam, ne jár ki a tóra, oda járnak fürödni a lányok, gólya madár, szégyen ne hoz rájuk, oda járt a hosszú lábú gém is.